The summer was cruel in that this is the wettest July Berlin has ever seen. Hi, welcome, come on in. My name is Aoife, and today I am wrapping up the 6 books that at the beginning of May I put onto my summer TBR. I work on the Celtic calendar, so for me, the months of summer are May, June, and July. It gives me 3 months to work on all of those summer vibey books. If that means books that are set at the beach, if that means books that have a pastel, bright cover, romances, simply anything that will scream summer at me will go on this list. I put 6 books on at the start of May that I really wanted to concentrate on for the coming 3 months. Let's see how we did. There is unfortunately one book that we cannot go into super big detail about because I never even picked it up, and that is The Good, the Bad and the Aunties by Jessie Q. Sutanto. I had high hopes for this one because I wanted to read the second book in the Dial A for Auntie series, Four Aunties in a Wedding, and then move on to The Good, the Bad and the Aunties. And I did half of that. I did read Four Aunties in a Wedding, and I didn't love it. It was fine, but it was a little bit too chaotic, and I think I just needed a break from that world. But when I was ready to go back to it, I could never find a copy of it available at the library. It is one that I am potentially going to pick up in the future, but as of now, we've moved on. And the other 5 books on the list, I did get to. Starting with My Best Friend's Honeymoon by Meryl Wilsner. I was super excited for this one because I have loved the other books from them that I've read previously, so I had very high expectations going into this. And that may be what my downfall was, because this just did not work for me. It's following Elsie and Ginny, who have been best friends since they were about 15 years old. They're now 23, and Elsie is planning her wedding to Derek. Elsie, however, has been blindsided when it turns out that Derek has planned the entire thing with absolutely no input from Elsie. Now, if you know most girls of that age, they've kind of been dreaming of their wedding day since the day that they realised what a wedding was. So Elsie is a little bit miffed that she never had any input on what the wedding was. She decides to leave Derek about a week before their wedding was supposed to take place. And instead of going on the honeymoon with him, she's going to bring her best friend Ginny with her. Now, Ginny has had feelings for Elsie ever since they laid eyes on her, and Ginny sees this as the perfect opportunity to really tell Elsie how they feel. They spend an entire week in the Dominican Republic with sun and sand and a tropical paradise, basically. And when they discover the feelings that they have for one another, they basically do nothing else but each other. And don't get me wrong, I love a book where there's steamy scenes in it, and I'm not a prude. I love reading that kind of thing, but I also need the book to have a plot in there. And for a good chunk of this book, there was no plot to speak of. It was just, when are we next going to get our hands on one another? And that for me got a little bit too repetitive. I needed there to be a break from it. I needed there to be some kind of, okay, we've gone out of the room and we've done this. Even when they were outside and they were horseback riding, there was still that kind of, oh, if we sneak away behind the stables, we can feel each other up. And it just got a little bit too much for me. Something that I might be putting this down to is how old the 2 people in this book were. They were in their early 20s, and I think we all know when hormones are absolutely flying when you're in your early 20s, and it's your first big sexual experience, it's your first big relationship, and you're feeling all of these big feelings. And I think that that might be a contributing factor to it, but as somebody who is a little bit older than that, there just needed to be a little bit more substance to it. Speaking of the 2 of them being 23, I did feel like a 23-year-old getting married was verging on child bride territory. In Ireland, in the EU, we tend to get married a little bit later, around our late 20s to early 30s. Whereas in the US, I know that there is more of a culture of getting married almost straight out of university, so you'll be 22, 23 when you're getting married. That was a bit of a culture shock for me, as somebody who is more used to the latter stages. It was a little bit odd for me to read about somebody who was 23 getting tied down so legally so early. Something else that I didn't really agree with was the third act conflict in this book. Ginny walks out of their job when basically schedule conflicts means that they may not be able to go on the holiday, and they decide, you know what, I need this job a lot less than it needs me. I really thought it was a good idea not to tell Elsie about that. Elsie was going through such a huge personal change and such a big time in her life that it felt secondary what was happening with Ginny. And I understand why they thought not to mention it, why they thought to leave it behind until they had gotten back to the States and it was time to bring it up then. I thought that this was actually a pretty mature decision, but Elsie's reaction to this was just completely off the handle. I have been relatively critical about this book, but there was something that I did like about it, and that is Elsie's relationship with her family business. Elsie has been working in the family business ever since she graduated university, and she's working towards bringing in a new kind of a brand and a new concept to the business. They've had the same brand and the same logo for years and years, and it's getting a little bit tired and old. And Elsie wants to bring it into the modern times, and her father is continuously just dragging his heels. I thought it was really great to see her storyboarding all of these ideas and talking about it with her sister and bringing all of these ideas to fruition, and finally standing up against her dad and just telling him, this is what I think is best for business. Not a personal jab at you, but a professional holding your hand while I'm telling you this. I thought that her kind of metamorphosis there from I am so afraid to tell my father something to he really needs to hear this and I don't mind if it hurts his feelings. I thought that that was such a great turnaround from the start of the book. In case it hasn't been obvious about how I've spoken about it, this was not my favourite of Meryl Wisner's books so far. I am hoping that this is just a blip in the radar, and the next one that they bring out, I'm going to be right back on track there. On then to One Golden Summer by Carly Fortune. This just felt like the absolute must-read summer book for 2025. It is following Alice and Charlie, and people who have already read Carly Fortune's work will be a little bit familiar with Charlie, as he is the older brother who popped up in Every Summer After. Alice and her family used to go to Barry's Bay when she was younger, and she has always had an interest in photography. When she was about 17 and she was there in a summer break, she took a picture of 3 people around her age that she didn't really know who they were. They were out on a yellow boat and she was just so moved and struck by the scene that she took a picture of it and has basically held on to that picture ever since. But now that she is in her 30s, she is back in Barry's Bay with her grandmother, who is recovering after breaking her hip. Alice is walking around town one day and she bumps into Charlie at the grocery store and is instantly smitten by him. As things develop, it turns out that Charlie is one of the 3 people who was in that photograph, and the other 2 in it are his brother Sam and Sam's now wife Persephone, or Percy. I absolutely loved this aspect of the book. I really loved getting back in touch with everybody that we have known and loved from Barry's Bay and figuring out what it is that's happening in their lives. Sam and Percy are expecting their first child as we meet them in this book. And while I'm not always a fan of a pregnancy progression, this made sense. I think this was taking place about 2 or 3 years after the events of Every Summer After. So it naturally made sense that they had gotten married and that they were now expecting a child and had built a house and all of that things. It just added up a little bit more than it would have done if it was in the epilogue of the book, for example. While Alice is in Barry's Bay, she decides that she wants to take herself out of her comfort zone a little bit. So she puts together a list with 17 things that she would like to accomplish by the end of the summer, so that she can feel a little bit more secure about herself. And when Charlie discovers that this list exists, he decides he's going to help her out to tick off as many of the boxes as possible. I really love that kind of a narrative in books. The whole, I have a bucket list that I want to finish, or I have this lifelong dream of doing XYZ. I really love seeing people achieve the things that they've set out to. As a ticky box girl myself, it is huge for me to see people ticking their own boxes in books. So I absolutely loved this aspect of it. And I also really loved how cheeky Charlie was at times while he was trying to get involved with Alice and helping her out in her goals. This book, towards the end, does go through quite a serious turn, as Charlie goes through quite a serious medical procedure, and other reviews that I have read have said that there are a couple of signs that are pointing towards this. Now, I was blindsided. I didn't see any of this coming. I didn't see it approaching at all. There were definitely signs that I could have picked up on. But that's not to say that it wasn't pointed out. That's not to say that it wasn't written well. It's just not something that I had picked up on. But I do think that it was written really well. Did it explain quite a lot of things that Charlie does in his life? Yes. Did it excuse a lot of them? I wouldn't particularly say so. But when you realize what this is and how it's been happening and why he's been doing these things, it kind of starts to make sense. I also just really loved the connections in this book. I really loved the friendship that developed between Alice and Percy as the partners of two brothers. I really loved how close they had gotten with one another, how tentatively they had built up this friendship and this relationship between the two of them, to the point that Percy just takes Alice's phone one day, puts her phone number in, and says, "Here, now you can message me about anything you want, anytime that you wish." But I also really loved watching Alice's family. Her grandmother and she had this absolutely stunning connection. But I also really love reading a sisterly relationship. And Alice and Heather had a really great relationship, despite them not necessarily being in the same place for the entirety of the book. There are also two younger twin siblings that have got a kind of a distant relationship with Alice and Heather. And I think that a contributing factor to that is the age gap between them. Because those twins are about 20, 21, whereas Alice and her sister are in their early 30s. So when there's quite a big age gap between siblings, it does make sense that they might not be as close with one another. But I also really loved the connection between Alice and her niece Bennett. They had such a nice relationship between the two of them. And you can really see that Bennett really trusted Alice, that she looked up to her so much as another mother figure. I absolutely loved all of the relationships in this book. This is the third of Carly Fortune books that I have read. I've read Every Summer After, which is the prequel to this, and I've read This Summer Will Be Different. But I still have to read Meet Me at the Lake, and I don't know if I can wait so long into summer next year before I'll go and pick that up. Then I read Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez. I've had a tumultuous relationship with her. I absolutely hated The Friend Zone, which was her debut novel, but I had a really great time with Part of Your World and Just for the Summer. So I thought, you know what? Let's give her another try. I'm starting to think I might need to distance myself from her, because Say You'll Remember Me just didn't reach the heights of those last two books. This is about Samantha and Xavier. Samantha and Xavier meet when she brings a small kitten who she's found on the side of the road into Xavier's vet surgery. And he goes about to save it, but there is this chemistry between the two of them that they just cannot deny. Samantha and Xavier head out on the first date from heaven the day after. They head out to a puppy adoption drive where they have been helping out with getting people to view all of the animals that are there and setting up new adoption certificates. And then they don't want the day to end, so they head out on a game of laser golf, go for a walk along the beach, get ice cream together. And the next day, Samantha head back to California to be with her family. Her mother has been suffering from dementia, and things have gotten to the point where they really need another hand on deck. So she leaves her home in Minnesota and heads back to be with her mother and her family, all while working on the side as the social media manager for a mustard company. There were a lot of inclusions on the posts that Samantha had been putting up on Instagram for this company. And it really was, you can tell a millennial is working on this, because it was just so tongue-in-cheek and often at times brazen. There's no other age group that you can think it would be. There is one thing that immediately struck me as I was reading this book, and it is that I never felt like I wanted this couple to work out. I am not a big believer in a long distance relationship. If there is a long distance relationship in play, there does need to be a very serious talk about when we can finally close the distance. And there was never any situation where that was possible for Samantha and Xavier. He was caught in Minnesota because he was tied up with trying to get his vet practice off the ground. And Samantha was tied to California and to her family and taking care of her mother. There was never a time where either of them were going to really be able to move to each other's places and be in each other's lives for a much longer time than the week or the 2 weeks or so that they had gone to visit one another. It came to the point that they had gone to visit, I think Xavier had gone to California, and they were sitting on the pier in Santa Monica, and they kind of said, "This is really tough. I don't know how we're going to make this work." And in my head, I was like, I don't think you can make this work. And it is okay if this doesn't work. And that is where the book should have been roll credits onto the next one. I just never had this period of time where I was like, oh my God, it's definitely going to work out. Oh, they're definitely going to end up happily ever after. I don't think that that is what you should be thinking when you are reading a romance book. The main point of it is that you should be on their side. You should be hoping that they get over any obstacle that comes their way. And believe me, there was obstacle after obstacle after obstacle in this book. It was like anything that could go wrong went wrong spectacularly. And when you're reading a romance book, you really need to be rooting for them to get together. There's also a lot of influence from both of their families in this book. Of course, we spent quite a lot of time with Samantha and her sister and her brother and her dad and her mother and grandmother, who are all in the house together trying to make everything work. And I really liked the kind of camaraderie that the family had. But I also thought that they definitely needed an intervention at times to try and make what was going on with them work better than it was going. There was so much, you are to blame for this, and this is all because of you. I really think that they needed somebody to sit them down and to help guide them through dealing with somebody who has dementia. But we also see quite a lot of Xavier's family. His parents were emotionally and verbally abusive to him as he was growing up, and Xavier has gone pretty much low to no contact with his parents. If he is in touch with them, it's very sporadically, it's very much surface level things, and it was getting towards the side of a no contact situation. I had gotten the feeling that he hadn't been in touch with his parents for coming on to 5 years by the time this book was taking place, which made it a little bit confusing and concerning for me when he picks up the phone when his mother calls. You might think, okay, she's calling to tell me that somebody has passed away, or she's calling to make sure that I'm aware that this person has passed away. But when it goes down the route that you're pretty sure you know where it's going to go down, it just broke my heart all over again. There was absolutely no reason that Xavier needed to go back down that road, and there was absolutely no reason that he needed to answer that phone call. Something that I will say in praise of this book is that the dual narration for the audiobook made it seem really realistic about the long distance thing. Of course, they're not really going to be in the same room as one another, but the two audiobook narrators did a fantastic job of portraying both of these characters in different climates, different time zones, different parts of the country, and making it seem like they somehow would fit in together. I really enjoyed the narration of the audiobook, and I think that that was particularly a highlight for me for a book that just never really did it for me the entire way through. Then onto a book that can only be described as catastrophic chaos. The World According to Conk by Philomena Conk. I absolutely adore Philomena's documentaries on Netflix. So when I saw that she had a book come out, which was basically describing how the world came to be right from the Big Bang up until about 30 seconds ago, I had to read it. I really love this kind of wacky, far out humor that the show has. So I knew that the book would be something for me. It is pretty much take the script of the show and put it into the pages of a book. There are so many in-jokes to things that would have happened on the show. There's mentions of my friend Paul, who, if you've watched the show, you'll be familiar with his antics across the world. And I absolutely loved this book. Now, is it going to win any Pulitzer Prizes? No. Is it going to be on the Booker Prize list? Absolutely not. But is it something that you can read to pass away a rainy afternoon, or just something to pick you up if you've been in a little bit of a funk? Absolutely. Finally, I eventually got to 7 Days in June by T.A. Williams after this lingering on my TBR for about 7 billion years by now. This I read as a buddy read with my friend Julie from Pete Cam with Books and Coffee. We both had access to a copy of it, and we just decided that it would be a really nice one to sit and read together. This is about Eva and Shane. They knew each other when they were 15, and Eva was attending Shane's school for a week, and they were caught up in all of the big feelings of teenage love. It is now about 15 to 20 years after this eventful week in their lives, and both of them are working as authors. Both of them have also been inserting little clues about the other into their works the entire way through their bibliography. Eva has been writing as a hugely successful erotica fiction author with 15 books in a series under her belt, whereas Shane is like a literary god, and he has worked on his next book for such a long time. But Eva is now feeling like it's time to move on from that world, and Shane doesn't really know where he wants to go either. The two of them meet each other again at a kind of a Comic-Con for authors, and they rediscover all of the big feelings that they had for one another. I absolutely loved the writing of this book, but there were a couple of things that did trip me up. I had expected that there would be a dual narrative from Eva and Shane's perspectives, but I didn't expect all of the other points of views to come in, and there were so many of them. We spent time in the heads of Eva's mother about 10 or 15 years ago, in the head of Cece, who is Eva's agent. We spent time in the head of the principal of Audrey's school, the aforementioned Audrey, who is Eva's daughter. We also spent some time with her. And I just think that there were a couple of points of view too many in here. It did get a little bit clunky and cluttered at times. And there were a couple of times that I thought, I don't need to know the innermost thoughts of this person. It's okay if they just stay on the periphery. But overall, I did really enjoy this book. Having said that, one of the chapters that stood out to me the most isn't actually from Eva or Shane's point of view. It's from the point of view of Audrey, who is Eva's 12-year-old daughter. Before we go into Audrey's chapter, Eva and Audrey have had this massive argument between each other. The argument stemmed from Audrey giving her classmates therapy sessions because she saw herself as a therapist. This is the line of work that she wanted to go into, and she was pretty sure that she was qualified to do the job. This brought me screaming and laughing back to when I was 12 years old, because you start hearing about jobs and they start sounding really interesting, and then you're just a girl with a job and a dream, and this becomes your entire personality. And that's kind of what happened here. And I absolutely love how Eva dealt with it as a parent. I like how the school dealt with it, but I also really love reading the chapter from Audrey's point of view afterwards. You really get to see how this argument with her mother has impacted her. Audrey and Eva are pretty much living by themselves because Eva has separated from Audrey's father, and they don't really see each other very often. So I really loved watching this respect that Audrey has for her mother, the love that she has from her just blossom from every page that I was reading. I also really enjoyed watching Shane as a mentor to young people who were growing up in disadvantaged areas, particularly young boys of colour. And I really loved watching how much respect that they had for him and how much he was changing people's lives and trying his best to make a difference, even if it didn't always work out successfully. I just really loved watching their confidence and their possibilities grow from the first time that they have met Shane and from the first time that we've met them. It was such a heartbreaking but heartwarming thing to read. Something else that I really enjoyed reading is the scene where they go to a spa in the middle of the day and things start to get a little hot and heavy. This is overall a literary fiction book, but there are a couple of steamier scenes in here that I thought were placed well, that I thought were written well, and that never really detracted from the rest of the book. But this isn't necessarily one that I would describe as a romance. So if that's what you're going into this looking for, I'm afraid you'll be sorely disappointed. But if you just want a contemporary fiction book about two writers who feel a little bit at the fork in the road and all of the impacts that they has had on the lives of the other people around them, this is a really great way to go. Those are the books that I put on my summer TBR for 2025. What has been your summer reading highlight this year? If you'd love to leave me a comment, if you can't think of anything you'd like to say, then just leave me an ice cream emoji. Don't forget to like and subscribe because I have new videos up every week. Now, get on out of here.